You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change. Now, the last episode, I was really interested and pleased to see how I got quite a lot of good response about that one. And in fact, people did agree that we're not having a lot of conversation about it. So for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, the last episode of Inspire Change was to inspire our community to speak more about a topic that's often kept quiet, and that is the issue of men and aging. Okay, so we're sort of a little bit shy on that one. And as I said in the last podcast, one of the issues that I have is that we spend an enormous amount of media time on women aging, but we don't really have a solid, firm conversation about men and aging. Yet we complain about issues like men's anxiety, depression, existential crises, suicide. And so it is a real issue in my view, that this is a topic that I see as being neglected. Now, in the last episode, I sort of gave an overview of that I saw as being the problem. Okay, so we talked about, the physical aging. We talked about the impact psychologically and socially and spiritually. And what I want to do is I've actually decided to continue the topic for a few sessions because I think there's a lot in it. And I want men especially to buy into this and begin to talk about it. And so when I'm talking about aging, what age group am I talking about? And I could argue that fundamentally we start aging the moment we're born, or in fact, if I go further back, the moment we're conceived, there is an aging process. Now, in the beginning, we talk about, development, but we get to a certain age and suddenly that issue of development changes into aging. And the question I want to pose fundamentally is, where does that point start? When do we stop talking about developing and when do we start talking about aging? So, one way of sort of unpacking this is to first of all start at the pointy end of the stick, which is fundamentally physically, right? And as you probably all heard who've subscribed to this podcast, I talk about a pyramid through which I work with men and work them through this pyramid. So the first level is about their physical being. The second level is psychological being. The third one's social, and the fourth one is spiritual. Okay, and I think that they're interconnected. And in many respects, in my experience, and that's 4 decades of working as a psychologist and a therapist, these areas fundamentally need to be aligned. We need to work on aligning them, because you can be ticking over physically really well, but your mental health still might be in the toilet. Okay? Or we might be doing well sort of psychologically to some degree, and I would argue that we can never be completely psychologically well unless we also have a strong social well-being happening at the same time, and similarly physically. So these levels in this little pyramid, this constructed pyramid, are interconnected, and they create a feedback loop. And I want you to think about that. One of the big issues through COVID was that people were socially isolated. So what a lot of people did is they focused on, physical exercise. especially men. If you were lucky to have a gym at home, you threw yourself into that, and if you weren't, you would go out for lots of walks. You know, always amused at how many dogs looked absolutely and totally worn out from being dragged around the various tracks, and some of them voted by simply eventually lying down on the footpath and refusing to go any further. Okay, so keep this pyramid, this framework in mind, because we want to be able to sort of really get into it. Now, one of the important papers that I think, I don't think it's available anymore, but I some time ago received a Harvard Medical School special health report on a guide to men's health 50 and forward. Now, okay, so here's an important point that I'm trying to make, which is, when do we start to talk about aging? Now, once upon a time, and there is still some argument for this, is that potentially we're talking about 35 onwards, right? But, when we look at, people's sort of physical, mental, and social functioning, my sense is that, that's a little bit early, but it's probably a good marker to go and create a baseline for how well you're actually monitoring and maintaining your lifestyle to give you longevity. Now, at 35, one of the things that I see with a lot of guys is they're actually burning the candle at both ends with the blowtorch, melting the middle, right? So we actually at 35 often are not paying a great deal of attention to our physical well-being. The amount of alcohol use, drug use, both together, high-risk sports that I see amongst a lot of guys going on. I'm sort of going, yeah, dude, you're really not paying attention to what's going to happen in your 40s and 50s. Because the reality is that, our physical well-being isn't there forever. There are changes that go on, and they certainly seem to start happening around 35 to 40. Things like cardiovascular fitness, metabolic rates, blood pressure, all those sort of things. So this Harvard medical report was really, really fascinating for me to read, because I really did focus a lot on, issues about how do you reduce your health risks from heart rate, from heart disease and through to dementia, stuff about eating better, blah, 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 blah. So let me get into this in a little bit more detail, because in this 20 minutes, I want you guys to actually go, okay, let me get a handle on this. Let me do an audit on what the hell am I doing to my body and what do I need to change? Okay, because a lot of us as men are simply, and the only word that I can use is atrocious in how we take care of ourselves. So this is a bit of a rev up, guys, because I want you to sort of really get into doing an audit, because in the next couple of podcasts, I'm going to go into the psychological stuff, into the social issues, and also into the spiritual issues. Working for 4 decades with men specifically has given me a really good insight and into what to do and what not to do. Because some people are arguing that 60 these days was like 40, 25, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I'm not really going to go into that at the moment. What I want to do is talk about the reality of aging. And that is that at some point we need to go, if I punish my body, yes, it will recuperate to some degree, because it's actually quite sort of flexible and adaptive, but it's going to leave me a legacy. And that legacy is really going to kick in around the beginning to the middle of the third age. So if we understand the process, then we are going to be able to be better equipped to address this. Okay, so let's take a little minute. Okay, and what are we talking about? Okay, so there in the big picture, there are some interesting changes as we go past 40. And part of that is decreasing muscle mass, thinner skin, hair loss, changes in body composition. Competition. Now, there's a Freudian slip if I've ever heard one. So a lot of men are now offsetting that, and this is a positive thing, by staying physically active. So we go to the gym, we go for walks, we run, we cycle, we surf, we swim. All of that is really, really good. Now, one of the other things that happens as we get older is hormonal shifts. And, again, we focus on women with their hormonal shifts, usually because it scares most guys, half to death, going, I wonder what my partner's going to be like when she hits perimenopause and menopause. We already had enough trouble when women are menstruating in some men's eyes. Again, there is this almost sort of gender bias embedded in this. And yes, some people have a difficult time, and I'm not denying that. But we as men similarly go through hormonal change. One of the things is that testosterone drops. Now, you're really in trouble when you're highly stressed or anxious because your adrenaline's going to be surging. You're going to get elevations in cortisol, and that's going to set up a whole bunch of stuff like inflammatory processes and the reduction in testosterone. So, yeah, you're going to feel like having, a lot of sex? Probably not. If you're on antidepressants, take that right out of the picture often as well. You go through the motions, but it's not that satisfying. So they're very clear. It's very clear that there begins to be a significant change. Now, unfortunately, as a lot of us as men will attest, a lot of us are avoidant to acknowledge these. So we try to tuck this away and go into this place of denial, And so that's not good. Being in denial is never healthy. So that's a psychological issue. So one of the things that we need to work with is what is the reality of our physical changes. Now, having been a therapist and a counsellor and a coach and mentor, one of the things that I do in the beginning of meeting someone to work with is I get a sense of where they're at physically. So, what's their lifestyle like? How do they manage stressful situations? And I'm talking about physical stresses as well. So, for instance, are they over-exercising? Are they drinking a lot? Are they drinking a lot with the assistance of stimulants? And this is a particular concern because everybody starts thinking about stimulants being, speed, ice, cocaine, that sort of thing. But a large percentage of people these days are on legal prescribed stimulants, Ritalin, dexamphetamine, and so on. And the reality is they have a similar effect as the illegal ones. So a lot of people actually on stimulant drugs tend to drink more alcohol. Not good. You don't sleep well. So a lot of stuff around sleep becomes very, very important because that is, one of our major foundations of resilience is good quality and good duration of sleep. So, when we don't look after this, some of our major concerns are about heart disease, prostate health, osteoporosis, diabetes, and the biggie is cancer. In that Harvard review, at the age of 65 onwards, cancer is the biggest killer. Now, interestingly enough, there are some things that we can do that will alleviate the problem. So one of the things that I also do with guys when I first meet them, if they haven't had a regular health screen and checkups, I try to encourage them to go. Get it done. There's always some reluctance to it, but by and large, I can be pretty persuasive in that space. So let me talk about exercise because that's always something that comes up. One of the things that's being really emphasized these days is exercise and mental health. No argument. Unfortunately, a lot of men take this to the nth degree, as well as a lot of boys. It's interesting because there's this tendency to smash yourself exercise-wise when in fact that's not necessary and it's not usually actually that healthy. So we need to think about age-appropriate exercise. How do you work out in the gym so that you're not injuring yourself? So, a lot of good stuff comes out of walking, swimming, yoga, and some strength training. So, these things are not stuff that require a lot of money. You can do a lot of this stuff, basically just, rolling out of your bed into the front yard. So, these things, these lifestyle changes, including doing things like relaxation, meditation, um, focusing on breath work. A lot of people are getting into, ice baths and so on. All very, very, very good. And they have an effect of increasing the body's tolerance to stress so that we actually become more resilient. The other thing that's really interesting is the whole issue about nutrition and aging, which is how do you fuel the aging body? And for some of us as men, we actually probably should really have a chat, not just to our doctor, but also to a dietitian nutritionalist to really fine tune it. Again, the body needs things like calcium for bone health, fiber for digestive health, and importantly, omega-3 fatty acids for the heart. I enjoy having a little shot of olive oil from time to time, and I don't need to do it a lot. My wife cooks fundamentally only with olive oil, so I get what I need out of the diet that she puts together. She certainly wants me to be sticking around for a while. But again, one of the things that I want to sort of stress in this podcast is that these physical issues that we confront are interrelated. So exercise, nutrition, sleep, relaxation. All of us need to sit down and go, okay, how am I going to interweave this in my very busy lifestyle? And most of us go, I'll do that later. Or we start doing it, but we do it for a short period of time and then fall off the wagon with it. And one of the things, and this is I think really important, is that we're more likely to pursue healthy changes physically if we're doing it with someone, like a mate or a group, right? So that we support each other and we motivate each other together. So and here is an interesting fact, because what keeps the group or the one-on-one with my training buddy going is a sense of doing it together. So that connection that, for example, Dr. Mark Williams in Connected Species talks about is that keeps going, right? It keeps us moving forward. It's not just about competition. It's not, when we get older, coming first should actually become less important than actually doing it together for oneself to be healthy, and also to have the joy of watching someone that I, have a good relationship with doing the same, looking after themselves. So, this, and have discussions in whatever social group you are. Doesn't matter whether it's just with the guys or, with your partner. Think clearly about this. When you go out for a couple of beers, think about, is it a couple of beers or are you actually binge drinking and therefore compromising your well-being? Because one, you're not going to sleep well that night, and if you keep doing it every weekend, it's going to accumulate. One of the things that I learned very quickly in drug and alcohol was binge drinkers have a higher risk of alcohol-related brain injury. Now, if you're also into heavy contact sports and you've had quite a number of concussions, this is a really bad mix. Now, fortunately, the whole thing about impact or body contact sports and the effects on brain health is really in the forefront at the moment, and it's really good to see because, again, there is a correlation, a very high correlation between concussion-related injury, brain injury, and a lack of emotional regulation and domestic violence. There's a string of it. It connects, it's like this interconnected set of dominoes that fall. And, we talk a lot about reducing domestic violence, but we also need to talk about the sources of that. And so if I look at it from a physical point of view, what's happening to my aging brain, right? And if I've got a propensity for dementia or Alzheimer's genetically, because that's a really important fact. So we've got, family history and genetics, and then the other aspect is, lifestyle. What's that equation looking like? Are we going into a mode of deficits and compromised function, or are we supporting ourselves to the best that we can to live well? So, a lot of guys go, I want to age disgracefully. And I have a little chuckle to, but, what's aging disgracefully? Well, sometimes it's a bit, like keeping your youth. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in the next podcast when I talk about psychological factors in aging for men, for us as men, right? But right now, it is taking care of yourself physically. And in that department, the message is, we want to really age gracefully. That is, I want to be able to maintain, good brain health, body health, and activity for as long as I can. I've watched too many people who have no plans, for transitioning from career into retirement, and suddenly, they go, whoopee, I don't have to work anymore. And then, they'll play golf for 6 to 9 months or go fishing, as much as they can. But after a while, they get jack of that. It just doesn't float the boat anymore. And then they're in this, vacuum about what do I do next. Now, we are on that level getting better. But, our alcohol, our drug use, whether it's illegal or prescribed or restricted or prescribed, is very, very high. And we need to ask, what's the price that we're paying for that? So, to wrap it up here, right? So we need to understand our physical changes. We need to address and be proactive about our health concerns. We need to exercise regularly. We need to eat a balanced diet, right? And we need to really get good sleep and practice some form of relaxation. Now, this is where I want to encourage everybody out there to get really active. Share your thoughts. Be open about it. Join up with people about, whatever activity it is that you want to do. Go walking, okay? So really important. So I hope this is useful and inspiring, and stay with me for the next, for the other podcasts where I'm going to talk about, the issue of aging, psychology, and, how do we age socially, because there's a lot of pressure there in a way that's very negative. And so what does it mean about our relationships, and what does it mean to me from a spiritual point of view as well? Do I feel really like I've maintained a sense of purpose and meaning as I go on? If you're further interested in my work, please have a look at my website, www.goodmengreat.com or www.gunterswoboda.com. Look for my book, Making Good Men Great, Surfing a New Masculinity, and for a bit of fun and a bit of adventure, I tap into Mountains of the Sea, adventure story about the islands and surfing and love and becoming a good man and then a great man. And until next time, this is me signing off. Inspire others.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit makinggoodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda@noartainment.com. That's Miranda at NOIRTAINMENT.com.